to give you a moment. But I want to welcome all of you and tell you that there has been an enormous response and interest. And I think it speaks to really the need we feel as educators to learn more about how to be our best, to really be excellent in this time when we see the great needs of our students and our families. We're so glad that you're joining us. I see that we now have 300 people with us. So again, you are not alone. You know, if you can take this moment to take a deep breath, that's what I'm doing. I have to say, when we first started planning this back in the spring, we had no idea what the interest or excitement would be, but clearly there is tremendous excitement. And like I said, we're so glad that you are with us today. And I think you will be so glad that you're with us today as well. So let me start by introducing myself and the project that we are part of. I'm Shelley Mann-Lev, and I'm here with a really fabulous team of presenters who you'll get to meet in a moment. And this is, as I said, the first session in schools in the opioid epidemic in the age of COVID. We are very grateful to the Opioid Response Network for supporting this project, and to the great team that's going to be supporting as well. Let me just acknowledge the back team first, which is Rachel Whitmer and Michelle Baker and Brooke Fisher, really fabulous, fabulous project managers and Zoom tech support. And then I'm going to tell you briefly about myself and then allow each of our practitioners, our expert practitioners, to say hello as well. As I said, I'm Shelley Mann-Lev. I spent 20 years as prevention coordinator for the Santa Fe Public Schools here in New Mexico. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and have had the opportunity to oversee 2 of these curriculum. One is Project Success for 5 years, and the other is Life Skills Training, which I implemented for almost 20 years and is still ongoing in the Santa Fe Public Schools. Next, I'd like Cedric Hall to say hello and give a brief introduction.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you all are in the world. My name is Cedric Hall, coming to you from New York City. I'm the principal of a school called Eagle Academy for Young Men, a 6th through 12th grade school for all boys, middle and high school. So really excited to be here with you today as one of the practitioners to present to you some of this great curriculum and how to implement it into your school communities, specifically in this time of COVID.
Wonderful. And Michelle Baroni, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Baroni. I'm so happy to be here today. I'm all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, and I am the Prevention Clubhouse director, and we're called Club Meets Do It Up. I'm super happy, super excited to be able to teach you a little bit about what we've been doing during the COVID.
Michelle, thank you so much. And Cedric, and then Mandy Paradise, please.
I'm Mandy Paradise. I work at the state of Washington as the Prevention Intervention Services Program Supervisor. That's for our State Department of Education. I've done direct prevention and intervention service in schools for over 12 years. I've served in both traditional and alternative school settings. So I bring an experience with behavioral health, sexual health, and curriculum implementation. And that even includes doing implementation of evidence-based programs in schools as part of rigorous evaluation studies and implementing mental health literacy curriculums. So besides doing what I love and supporting the Student Assistance Program at OSPI, I enjoy my time with my friends and family.
Wonderful. Welcome, Mandy. Thank you so much for being here with us. I think I'm just going to do next, Rachel. Next slide, please. So the Opioid Response Network is funded by SAMHSA, and it is there to assist anyone working to address the opioid crisis. Educators, coalitions, grantees, other organizations, and individuals, and the technical assistance that they provide in prevention, treatment, and recovery is free. Fabulous. People like all of us are available to all of you. Next slide, please. There are experienced consultants in every state, and there is a regional technology transfer specialist who's an expert in implementing evidence-based practices and programs like these, who helps sort out what you need. Next slide, please. So if at the end of this session you go, there's something I really want to work on that addresses opioids and now actually methamphetamines as well, the Opioid Response Network is able to take those requests by, you can see the website, opioidresponsenetwork.org. It's also the place that you'll be able to get access to a resource list, slides, and this recording, and of course, email the ORN or make a phone call. You will get these slides. They will be made available to you in an email that will be sent out tomorrow. Next slide, please. Few technical disclosures. We're able to offer 1.5 CEUs for chess and also for certified prevention specialists. As you can see, there's also conflict of interest disclosures. None of the presenting team have any conflicts of interest. Next. Thank you. And we're grateful to the University of Missouri at Kansas City School of Nursing and Health Studies for sponsoring the CHES, the Certified Health Education Specialists. If you need CEUs, you will need to complete the evaluation. Of course, we hope all of you will complete the evaluation. In a webinar, it's a lot harder to get feedback, although we appreciate that you're putting some things in the chat. But a link to the evaluation will be included in that email tomorrow. And we really hope that we'll get feedback from you, because this is the first of 3 learning sessions, all held at the same time, same day on Thursdays. Next week, as we'll say, we'll be doing one focused much more broadly on schools and social emotional learning and prevention, how you can integrate. And then finally, the last one will be on December 12th, which will be on parent prevention education. Next. So let's get started, right? We came here for a reason to learn. And again, we're so grateful, all of you. Really, that's the biggest thank you. We're here for you, our participants. If you do have questions during this, there will be 4 presentations. I'll do the first one, and then followed by Cedric, and then Cedric talking about life skills training, Michelle talking about 2 good programs, and Mandy talking about project success, 3 of the most popular and highly utilized evidence-based prevention curriculum. So after each of our presentations, there'll be a time period for your questions, and Rachel and I will be monitoring the chat, looking for those, or preferably actually makes our job much easier if you can put your questions in the Q&A, right? Yeah. Okay, so what are we doing here today? We are going to really looking at what we have to do, which is remote learning. Most of us, some people are in hybrid settings in schools, but most of us are involved in remote and virtual opportunities. So we really want to look at how can we implement these evidence-based prevention curriculum in these remote learning environments. We also, as we were developing this, realized that many of us, I implemented prevention curricula for 20 years. And I have to say, I really didn't understand a lot of the things around adaptations and modifications. So there's a lot to understand in terms of how do you maintain fidelity and impact. And that's what I'm going to do when we get started. And finally, we're going to give you some fun from 3 different people and hopefully impactful and effective ways to adapt these curricula, because the needs right now are great. Substance use is increasing in terms of particularly related to opioid use and methamphetamine. There's been somewhere, and I'll talk about this in the next session, 10 to 15% increase in deaths and in overdoses. There's lots of reasons for that. We know all about risk and protective factors. So now is a time in which we really need to be our most effective selves, taking care of ourselves and our students and the youth that we are reaching. Next. Great. Modifying and adapting evidence-based programs. A 10-minute introduction to implementation science. Please, next. So first of all, what's the difference between a modification and adaptation? Modification is the umbrella term. I'm always on Zoom aware, and I'm sure all of you educators, like, what can you see in the screen? Your hands, right? So it's the umbrella term, and an adaptation is a subset of modifications. The big difference is when and how in the implementation process the modifications. So an adaptation is something that's planned, deliberate, purposeful. And it's something, to the extent that we're able to do it, that's what we want to be doing, is we want to be doing modifications. Adaptations. Of course, learning is a dynamic process. Things change. Tech doesn't work. There's just a lot of things that happen. Someone doesn't show up. Things happen. So we aren't always able to make adaptations. Sometimes we just have to modify on the fly. And, that's what we do. As we make modifications and adaptations, those planned things, we really want to understand that they all have impacts. Some of them have impacts that enhance our outcomes, and that's what we really want to talk about today. And some adaptations can lead to worse outcomes, especially if they remove key elements or they don't align with the audience needs. So we are master adapters, we are educators, all of you, whether you're preventionists, whatever your role is. And Oh, welcome, Nai. I just saw somebody I know from New Mexico. It's wonderful you're here. We are master adapters. That's what we do as educators. And to the extent possible, we want to plan, be intentional and deliberate so that we can certainly maintain, but even hopefully improve outcomes. So next slide, please. Have you ever made changes in a curriculum program? Well, anyone who's taught anything knows that you have made changes. And what are some of the reasons that you've made changes? Put it in the chat. I know people have been introducing themselves, which is great, but let's see a couple of things in the chat. Why have you had to make adaptations? Why have you had to make modifications? Lack of time, it's not working, you're not engaging the kids, the side of the group. Cultural competency, absolutely, for the culture. Language, you need to switch the language you're using or just the terms you're using. Oh, thank you. The context, using, many of these, some of these curriculum you used, they were developed at a time we didn't have things like social media. And of course, most commonly right now, we are changing completely the setting, right? Home, here. So lots of reasons people are making changes. I see all kinds of things, and hopefully you're reading them too. I'm just going to pause for a minute as we can all take a look at them. Meet students where they currently are, developmentally appropriate, currently are in terms of mental health issues right now, the level of stress they're feeling, many, many reasons. And I think particularly besides that setting change, the reasons do matter, right? If you're making reasons to save time, we often get in trouble. You're making reasons to save money, you can get in trouble. So, some of the reasons are reasons that move you towards greater impact, and other reasons, hamper you, make it harder for you. Next slide. Great. So we make modifications and adaptations in the context, and we make them in the content. And the context is pretty obvious. We have format, right? Because it's much harder when you're teaching, when students sitting at home, or even for those of you, we could say, who are lucky enough to be in, a distance learning environment in person. It's not the same learning environment. You do not have four kids sitting at a table, right? Working together, chattering. I mean, it's just not, that's not what we're able to do. So the format has to be adapted either to much more individual learning or group learning that takes place in a computerized environment. Role plays, a staple of most of these prevention curriculum. How do you do a role play in a virtual setting? We're going to be hearing some examples of how our practitioners doing that. And, if you're going to adapt, you can have students write plays. There are radio plays. I don't know if you've had a chance, there's some phenomenal ones. There's ways you can do role plays. Obviously on Zoom, you're not looking at the person, but you can still have that interaction. I know you use many things besides Zoom, Google Classroom. I mean, there's 1,000 platforms. I kind of like Xerox machines. I guess I use Zoom as the generic. So you'll hear me saying that because that's the one that I have the most, that I use most frequently in my training and my work. So role plays, again, in terms of format, you can still do written assignments like worksheets and all kinds of things like tweets, chats, journal assignments, reflections. So there are many things that can, even though the format is different, as we see in the student sitting with maybe a parent, you can again use what's in that format and that setting. Use family members potentially. I mean, most of our students, some of our older students are alone. Many of our students have younger siblings they can practice something with. Maybe there are tools they can use. So format, setting of the classroom versus home. One of the issues we have to deal with setting is privacy. That if you're in a classroom, you know who's listening. If your students are home, you don't know who's listening, right? And so therefore there is that constant, I think when we're doing prevention work, need to remind our students, if it's virtual, that they may not have the privacy that they've had and that they need to be aware of that we can be talking about other people and not necessarily sharing sensitive information. In terms of personnel, I think some settings are needing to use a variety of personnel. Sometimes we have people more access to a school counselor because they can pop in out of different classrooms for 5 or 10 minutes. So personnel may be the same personnel and they may be different in this time. And then our students, and it's interesting because I think, you know, as I'm sure we'll hear from our practitioners, that our students are not the same people they were 6 months ago. Our youth are not in the same place. And we really need to be thinking about incorporating more stress management throughout all of our interventions, more times to breathe, more times to stand up, you know, and to sit down, more breaks. That is different than being in that person-to-person setting. And that we had to adapt before to learning abilities, to culture, to developmental appropriateness. But I think right now in the age of COVID, we need to be paying even more attention to trauma-informed instruction and strategies and to mental health needs, stress. So next slide, please. Common content modifications, this comes from the literature, is the most common, doesn't just come from literature, it comes from my every experience, which is that people omit core activities. They leave things out. They also sometimes lengthen lessons. Sometimes they shorten things, they don't leave them out. And sometimes they change the way the activities are done to increase engagement. That's positive to enhance outcomes. Hopefully that's why we change them. But of those, which is most common? Research shows it's leaving things out, omitting core activities. And it's what gets people in the most trouble, because which has the most negative impact outcome when we do the research, which is in the area of substance use, has not been done extensively. But when you leave things out, students don't learn things that are core to the prevention curriculum, core to the research theory behind it. So to the extent that you can, even if you have to shorten, adjust, spread out, and we'll talk, like I said in a moment, I'll mention some more things, you want to make sure that you cover all of those objectives. Next slide, please. So the goal is the North Star. We want to be consistent with goals and objectives. As my metaphor is a map. So the goal is our North Star. It's where we're headed. It's healthy, substance-free, resilient youth, right? The specific objectives come based on the research theory of a prevention program. And those objectives are your destinations, core elements that needed to be effective. Those are things that, as long as you are sticking to those objectives, you can know that you are going to be fidelity consistent and hopefully either maintain or maybe enhance that outcome. You can increase the recent engagement, improve the fit with the culture, the norms, and the mental health needs. And again, you know, you got to work with what we got, responding to challenges like COVID. Next slide, please. So, you know, part of my goal in this is that you all feel empowered, deputized, you know, like you've got a badge, I'm a master adapter, you've been doing this, you can do it, that you meet objectives in creative, engaging ways, that you maintain the dose, chunked, spread out, 5, 10, 15-minute segments. You work with that, again, still keeping your eye on that destination, your North Star and that destination, your objective. And then of course you adapt to add content to meet the needs of your audience. Great. So I think what I'm going to do is that's the overview. We're not going to take questions now. And I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, Cedric Hall, and he's going to focus on life skills training and how to make this happen. Please, Principal Hall.
Actually, Shelley, sorry, Cedric, not to cut you off, but there were 2 questions that kind of came in the very beginning of the webinar that are kind of overarching questions and not specific maybe to a particular curriculum that I thought it might be good to address now. First is from Sarah Robinson. She actually has a great question that is relevant to our topic next week, but I will throw that out to everyone. Are there any new evidence-based practices or ways in which current EVPs can be implemented that are culturally relevant and competent in dealing with the triad of the opioid crisis, racial violence, and COVID-19? Historically, EVPs have not been as relevant to or created by members of historically marginalized communities.
So Sarah, first of all, just thank you for your question. I think in your question is a statement, and you can hear in the emphasis on absolutely empowering you to adapt for culture. I'm not aware of any new evidence-based prevention programs. It doesn't mean they don't exist. And I will take this and take a little look at it that's specific to, for example, African-American communities or Latinx communities. There are some, I shouldn't say that, I can think about a few, and I will add them to our resource list. But some of the evidence-based programs have been tested with a variety of populations. But even, as we know, these cultures are not monolithic, right? And so therefore, it's your culture, your community, the theory, the research theory is part of that, but we need to address our students where they're at in systemic racism, their cultural needs, what's happening in this community. That's part of what we want to, if you will, expand and address. But no, I'm not aware of any evidence-based curriculum. It is a very intensive and expensive process to do the research on new curriculum. And what you're talking about really would be promising practices and enhancements, I think, to existing curricula.
Okay. And then the next question was from Nicole Kelly, who's just wondering if we have any data on the success rate of EBPs being implemented virtually during COVID.
So the answer, of course, is no, we do not. And I think one of the things actually that I wanted to encourage is that you do some of your own evaluation. If you are making adaptations in relation to objectives, is to get feedback, using the ways that you get feedback from students, whether it's polls, pop quizzes, demonstrations, products, that you get feedback on. Have they, for example, in an objective like stress management, are they able to use those skills? Let's stop, let's take our pulses, right? And so to build in that feedback, because all of the adaptations that Project Success, Life Skills Training, Too Good programs, all that are making, they have not been tested. They're not evidence-based. And so really we need to go back to our destination. Are we meeting that objective, and bring in those feedback mechanisms so we can really evaluate. So our next, thank you so much for the questions, Rachel. Our next speaker, for some reason we seem to have dropped off. So I'm thinking maybe Michelle, if you're willing to go next, can we switch the slides to Michelle, and then we'll come back, which will be great. So Michelle Baroni, we're so grateful that you're with us. Unmute yourself, please, Michelle.
Yes, ma'am. Let me get some control here.
All you, Michelle.
It sure is. All right. Hi, everyone. Well, again, let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Michelle Baroni, and I am the director for the Prevention Clubhouse in Georgia, named Club Mixtura. I've worked in the prevention field since 2006, so it's been a minute, and I'm super excited to teach you a little bit about what I have been doing with the Too Good for Drugs program. Like I said, I've been using this since 2006, and they have done amazing things on how to implement these strategies during the age of COVID. To understand a little bit more about Too Good for Drugs, it's an evidence-based intervention that has undergone rigorous evaluations to establish their effectiveness. The goal of Too Good for Drugs is to give youth the confidence and skills they need to grow into happy, healthy adults. Too Good for Drug does this all by touching on these different subjects: goal setting skills, decision making skills, conflict resolution skills, effective communication skills, problem solving skills, pro-social bonding, social emotional competency. One of these things that are not listed is the substance abuse portion. And the substance abuse portion obviously is tailored by your age. They have different curriculums according to the age of the students. Obviously, kids in K through 2, second grade would probably not be receiving these classes. By teaching these 5 essential social and emotional learning skills, research has linked that it has helped them with the development of their academic success. So I really do love this program. It's helped me so much, and this is going to be great for everyone. Too Good for Drugs is a universal intervention education program serving grades K through 12. In our community, we have been able to serve all ages. As you can tell in my pictures, these are my babies, and the far left was when I implemented the strategies on my 4th and 5th graders. In the middle, we have our high school students using the Too Good for Drugs and Violence curriculum for high school youth. And on the far right, we are using the 7th grade curriculum for our middle school. These have been really, really helpful for us. So each curriculum includes a student workbook that youth use to follow along and practice these skills learned from the curriculum. Handouts and takeaways are also incorporated into the workbook to simplify the lesson delivery. On the right-hand side, as I said to you guys before, was the 7th grade curriculum, and the curriculum on the left-hand side is the one that we use for the high school youth. So it is tailored specifically for, and it's very age appropriate. So the question is, what have I been doing? What is Club Mixtura? What's going on in Georgia? So we can continue these classes. What adaptations have we made? So the biggest thing is we're doing our classes via Zoom. It's been one of the best tools that we've used for us, has been the Zoom classes. And in order for us to do that and participate in those, we had to do deliveries. We delivered these workbooks to each one of the students' houses so that they could be able to follow along. It's extra work, but it's needed. So we have to make sure that we plan. Planning is key. All lesson plans have to be adapted, and we have to focus on making sure that these classes are done via Zoom. And prior to doing that, we made sure that our staff made care packages so that they could be able to follow along in the classes. At the bottom of this screen, you'll see like a link from Too Good Programs. And this link actually tells you what adaptations you can make for your clubhouse, your activities. It helps better for you to understand what adaptations you can make. And also maintaining that fidelity, because that's the main thing that we want to do. We want to make sure that that's done. We've also done use social media to enforce our topics, such as TikTok. We use Snapchat and YouTube, and that's just to reinforce a topic. We don't do it directly with the classes, but we do it sort of as an enforcer. So at the end of the program, excuse me, guys, I'm not able to go to the next slide. There we go. All right. Through the COVID, we were able to actually graduate 12 youth from the program. And on a normal occasion, we would do some sort of a big shindig, like a party with food. That obviously can't happen. So what we did was we delivered every diploma for each youth who graduated. And we did sort of like an ice cream party, inviting the parents to come along. I think it was one of the most cutest things that we've ever done. It was different, but it's sort of like our new normal at this moment. And so let's practice it. I would like to do at least one of the classes that we've done with the kids and kind of how it looks like in real life. And the class that we're going to do is called Set to Win. And the whole purpose of this class is to teach youth how to set reachable goals. The materials that we will be using is the 7th grade curriculum. And this is, like I said, age appropriate for your youth. Too Good for Drugs has done a really good job making sure that every age group is being catered to. So this is the one that we will be using for today. I know that when I started using this curriculum back in 2006, and this is going back to Sarah's question, Sarah Robinson, I believe was her name. The question that she asked was, have there been changes? And in my mind, I do believe there have been many changes since 2006. In 2006, my youth could not relate to many of the characters displayed in the curriculum. However, now that we're looking at the curriculum, they have Hispanic names that I've never seen, like Fearful Felipe. And they also had impulsive Ike. So they try to get different names from every culture to suit it better to everyone's culture. And I really did appreciate seeing that. So for this class, we're going to talk about, as I said, setting reachable goals. In the teacher's manual, they will give you absolutely everything that you need, literally a script in which you will read letter by letter, word by word, exactly what you're supposed to say to your youth. And this is what we want to make sure that the kids lead with. We want to make sure that they are able to define the goal in this class. We want to make sure all youth are able to define a goal, differentiate short-term and long-term goals, identify and apply the steps for setting and reaching a personal goal, and identifying available resources for support and assistance in working towards a goal. And they will step-by-step teach you and the youth how to do that. So I would love for you guys to be able to participate. If you can, put your answers in the Q&A section. Can you guys please tell me, why is it so important to set and reach goals for ourselves? Let's see what you guys have to say. We want to set a good example. Thank you, Courtney, to accomplish what we want. Have a sense of accomplishment. Amazing. Yeah, these are awesome. To stay on focus. These are the type of questions that we ask our kids to sort of get their minds rolling. This is what the Too Good for Drugs and curriculum has said to the youth. Goals give you a sense of purpose in life and something to strive for. Goals increase your sense of competence and confidence. Super aligned with all the answers that we've gotten. It may not be word for word exactly what's written on the curriculum, but we pretty much have the gist of what we want in a goal. Then we also want to make sure that we encourage students' response. Can you please tell me what the difference between a short-term goal versus a long-term goal? And they will usually say, oh, well, a short-term goal is learning how to ride my bike. And we have to make sure, is that just a short-term goal or does it take practice? So having them understand the difference between the two, because sometimes they do get confused. And so according to the curriculum, a short-term goal can be reached in a short period of time, like a day, within a week, or possible within a few months, such as doing well on an exam or cleaning your room. A long-term goal, it requires more time and involves more steps in order to reach that goal, such as mastering a foreign language or mastering an instrument. So as long as they leave with those two elements, then we've already reached that part, and they can give us sort of examples of what they think or what their short-term and long-term goals. So then I would like to practice with you guys. This is one of the things that were implemented in the curriculum, and this is one of the practice sheets. In this practice sheet, youth are asked to go to grandma's house, and they have to go to grandma's house in the shortest amount of time or the shortest distance. However, in each intersection and each road, there are specific rules that if you want to make a right on a particular street, the arrow has to be pointing to the curve to the right. If you wanted to go straight, the arrow had to point into the direction in which you wanted to go in order for you to reach grandma's house. This is actually very difficult because there's a lot of rules involved, and they only had 30 seconds. So they didn't get much time to plan their route to get to grandma's house. In the 30 seconds we timed them, obviously they have no idea how to get there. So then we let them understand, well, there's resources out there that help you. What's going to happen in the real world? In the real world, we have different resources to help us get to grandma's house. What are those resources that we have? GPS. So we say, youth, please go to page 24 in the curriculum. And in the curriculum is step-by-step guides on how to get to grandma's house. And obviously it makes it a lot easier to get to grandma's house using the steps. Why? Because now they have their guide. So I saw that someone gets mad. Someone in the chat says, my kids get mad. I know exactly how you feel. My kids get mad at that too. So as we said, we want to make sure that youth understand what a resource is and how they can achieve their goals using these resources. Can anyone from you guys please explain to me what a resource is? Let's see what you guys say in the chat box. Something that can help you. Thank you, Lauren. A guide. Oh, y'all are fast. Tools. I like it. Guides. Perfectly. Just things to help you get to what you need. How can these resources help you reach your goal? It helps you get to where you want to be. It gives you direction. I'm liking all these answers. Provide guidance. Exactly. Now, one of the things that I love to talk to the youth about is that resources can be something unconventional. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person. I know that kids our age, not kids my age, younger youth, they do not use resources in the same way that we all use resources. I know that we used to go to the library, and that's the best way we were able to get our information. Now they have the internet. I know that a lot of kids love to use different tools such as social media to be able to find help. I know that I have kids using TikTok specifically in order for them to be able to find out how to answer a math problem. So if you're having issues with math, there's different users on TikTok that can teach you and help you to answer these math problems. So that's what I wanted to make sure that the youth were able to get out of this class. The next thing that we speak about is about different steps on how to reach a goal. Within the program, within the curriculum, the box, the set that you purchase, included in these sets come with poster boards, different poster boards and different tools. And this was one of the things that we received, and it was a poster board letting the youth know about the different steps they have to take in order to reach a goal. Let the youth understand that it's not going to possibly happen in that exact same way. However, this is a guide, and this is to help them be able to understand better how easy it can be to reach those goals. So we tell them, please not to forget to name their goal. And when they're naming their goal, to please make sure that it's personal, that it's possible, that it's positive, and that it's specific. We want to make sure that while they're naming their goal, they understand these 4 categories before they move on to the next step. The next step obviously being picture yourself reaching that goal, saying, I can do it. You have the capacity of doing it, believing in yourself. Think about, how am I going to do this? Planning for it, as I said, in order for us to reach anything that we wanted to do, we had to plan it with a lot of time. Then go for it, do it, implement it. And then once everything is done, celebrate your success. Make sure, hey, I did a really, really good job. At the end of the class, we give our youth a handout and sort of a homework for them to practice at home. One of my greatest things and one of the things that I ask my parents to do most of all is I really want for them to ask their youth, ask their children, what is it that you have learned? Do you feel that you learned anything today? And I ask for my youth, hey, mom, dad, we spoke about goals today. Can you please tell me what one of your goals are? And that just opens the communication between the children and their parents, something that doesn't happen very often. Sometimes we get just so into our lives of work and school and after school activities that we forget to speak to our loved ones. So this is sort of like that icebreaker. This is what I learned today, and I want to talk to you about it. And it just keeps the conversation going. This is one of my most favorite curriculums, and I really, really do like it. I would love for everyone. If you have any questions to ask me, I could talk about Too Good for Drugs all the time.
There are questions.
So
First, please.
let me look.
So,
Have today's, go ahead.
First question I have that came from the chat is that how do you really use social media assets? Like, share more about how you use TikTok and other things to supplement.
So we actually did a, well, TikTok, as I said before, was done through helping kids as a guide. If they wanted to learn how to do a particular arts and crafts project, they had different users within TikTok that taught youth on how to do these projects. Specifically for us, more than anything, I really liked YouTube. With YouTube, we developed a channel called Club Mixtura, in which we ourselves, as the actors, let the kids know, oh, do you want to do a tie-dye t-shirt today? And we'll do the activity for them and teach them how to do it. And there's nothing better than to see your own instructor, your own people that you know, give the lesson, and how more personalized it is, because they know that this person did this specifically for me and my class, as opposed to, oh, here's just the link and figure it out. So it's a little bit more personalized. I do know that TikTok is something, it's a language they speak, and we need to speak their language, and that's the best way we can communicate with them.
Right. What about the physical games? Those are an important part of the Too Good program. It's very experiential. How do you adapt those in the virtual environment?
Standing up. You just stand up. There's in the managing emotions section, they have the kids go to a separate side of the room. So instead of going to the separate side of the room or whatnot, we would have each student raise their hand. If you chose to be on the wall A, if you chose this section, please raise your hand if you chose A. And then we get a little bit of a head count of who decided to choose what. And then the friends can go amongst their groups in Zoom to say, this is the reason why I chose A. And it's good to know why the other participants also chose A.
Great. So one of the questions that's asked, that Kathy Geiger asked, how do you do the pre-post tests? How do you do the evaluation?
Pre and post tests, we get a lot of help from the state. We have an evaluator from us in the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health. We have an evaluator who did this via through web. So she gives us a link, and we send our participants the link for this pre and post test. It's one of the only ways that we're able to measure their outcomes, see if they've learned it or not. And like I said, we're not completely finished, because we do need to continue doing the classes in order for us to finish and figure out what the final results are. But once we have those results, then we'll know whether or not this was effective.
That's great. And I know, thank you, Allison, for sharing that they use Google Forms. And it's interesting. And another participant, commented that wouldn't it be great if there was downloadable workbooks now? I mean, these are things that we need help from our developers. Actually, I will take that too and communicate that. And I think, the copyright issues get tricky, and we need to be aware that we are in an emergency situation. So if we are, have paid for the program and using it, that we need to have some flexibility. And I see Sarah added in multiple languages. I'll just add one other thing, which is somebody wrote that they work with a lot of people who have religious convictions that restrict use of TV or computer access other than for school at home. So how do you encourage them possibly to, or deal with their limitations to access, since they, it's more difficult, right? They have a cultural restriction.
It's very tricky, and we do have to understand and respect everyone's cultural differences. I know that because the pandemic hasn't lessened. However, we have become a little bit more open and more aware of what protocols we need to take in order to ensure their safety. So we are doing sort of in Spanish it's called miti, like half and half. We have certain kids come to the clubhouse, a certain number of kids. We cannot top that number in order to ensure our safety. If that were a kid that just did not have a computer, some children just don't have computers, then they would be more than happy to come to the clubhouse and do that in person, as long as they're wearing their mask, and as long as we check their temperature, and as long as we make sure that they are they don't have a fever or anything like that. So that is the best way we've been able to control it. And we do have to understand, if there's a kid who does not have a computer, maybe you can offer lending out a laptop if that's their downfall. But if they're needing, because of they're not allowed to be on a television or they're not allowed to use a laptop, then the space needs to be open for the youth as long as we're following protocol.
Right. So there's lots more questions. I think what we're going to do, some of those questions apply to some of the other as well, is I think we'll shift to our next presenter. And the other thing I'm hoping is that we may be able to do a frequently asked questions and have some responses to these at the end of this, after this, and send them out in writing. So thank you so much, Michelle. And now we're going to go back to really awesome. And as you can all tell, Michelle's a master practitioner. And we will also in that email send out information about a link to the developers of these, which will tell you about facilitator training and those details. I don't want to use our time to do that, but thank you. Okay, Cedric.
Hi, how's everybody doing? I'm talking to you guys from New York City. So a little bit of a different type of energy, a little bit of a different type of flavor, but very much like my co-panelists and presenters today, Michelle and Mandy, there are still scholars and youth in need, like across the rest of the country, where these type of curricula can really, really, really tap in and essentially save lives. And let's just be very frank and plain about the work that we're doing. 2020 has put a new energy and spin on the term crisis, but for those of us in this work, specifically with youth development and engagement, we know there's always crisis. So it's really exciting to kind of be here with you all today and be a third of the presentation of kind of what these curricula can do and how they can impact youth. My take on it is going to be a little bit of a hybrid between looking at the theory of how to really connect with the content to increase scholar and youth engagement, as well as talking about, again, some of those adaptations and what it looks like in this new digital virtual space that we're all in. Might need you to go to next slide for me, Rachel. So first and foremost, Botvin's life skills curricula has 3 specific program learning objectives. Just as Shelley began this presentation to all of you with objectives, it's really great that we anchor it as such. Again, I am an educator by trade, been in instruction and education for about 14 years. So a lot of which I'll be presenting to you comes in a format of lesson and teaching and learning. So we're going to start with the program objectives because, again, these are the core anchorings of the life skills curricula. The first being that of personal self-management skills, in which providing or provision of students with strategies for decision-making is key. This specifically has to do with stress and anger. These objectives are going to link very closely to some very specific themed and compartmentalized structures that we're going to talk about a little bit later with life skills. The other part is that there's a general social skills component. And what that does is it enables scholars, and I say scholars coming from New York City, but it enables scholars to strengthen their communication skills and build healthy relationships. We understand that this is going to be a keystone factor. Relationships, youth are relational before they're academic or instructional. So we have to remember that relationship is key in moving youth in any direction that we need them to. And it can be a crux as well as a benefit depending on the direction. It can go to the left or to the right, the negative or the positive. We always want to steer scholars in the positive, but remembering they're relational. The third piece is that drug resistance. This is a major name of the game. This is really why we're all here today, to really talk about some prevention and some different adaptations to, again, support scholars in healthy decision-making around their interactions with drugs and substances, to not lead to substance abuse. And this third component really helps to empower scholars to understand the consequences of substance use and risk-taking and the influences of the media. I'm gonna say the third again, because that's really where we're going to springboard into the rest of this presentation. This portion and objective of the curricula empowers scholars to understand the consequences of substance use and risk-taking and the influences of that on the media. Next. So, a code. A code by definition is the following: a personal ethical guideline to which a person is to live their life. Personal ethical guidelines to live your life by. I need everybody to drop into the chat for me right now. What is a code you have? Anything. What is a code you have? Any ethical personal guideline that steers your decision making in your life. Don't lie. That's a good one. Honesty. That's good. Do no harm. That's good. Be weird. I love it. Togetherness. Be respectful. Right? The Bible. Right? So we're talking about code maybe also being wrapped in a symbol. Being authentic. I like that one, and that's very specific to youth and being relational. And also fidelity, integrity, all these other things, and love. Let's talk a little bit about a code. I'm going to introduce to you a code that I personally have adopted and that I know many have, specifically by way of the wonderful Disney Plus launching. Next slide. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this television series. Season 2 just dropped, and I want to let you know I'm not receiving a check from Disney or any of those folks, right? Marvel, Star Wars, Feige, none of those folks. But I am telling you, this is a fantastic show. And it's a show not because of lasers and aliens, because I'll be very honest with you, I'm not much of a see, I almost messed up. I said I'm not much of a Trekkie. I'm not much of a Star Wars person per se. I'm learning, I'm backwards in my introduction, but really what's captivated me about the saga as a whole is the story of the Mandalorian. So for most people who know the Star Wars saga, this is a familiar character, but in recent time, we've dug in deep into what makes these bounty hunters who they are. Why are they so efficient, but why are they moving in the way that they move? What's their mindset, and how they became such a prominent character and base in the Star Wars saga. The Mandalorian is key. There's a very specific takeaway from this show that's piqued my interest and that I've shared with my scholars. The Mandalorians live by a code. Next slide. The code in which they present, I need you to take some mental notes because we're going to talk about this code in a moment.
The Empire is no longer, and the Beskar has returned. When one chooses to walk the way of the Mandalore, you are both hunter and prey. How can one be a coward if one chooses this way of life? Have you ever removed your helmet?
No,
Has it ever been removed by others?
never. I don't belong here.
This is the way.
This is the way. But he does. This is the way. I was...
This is the way. This is a very interesting space, right? There's a little bit more of this clip that I'll share with you guys where they go into this code of this being the way. And there's a very specific quote, next slide, Rachel, that is actually mentioned in the latter part of this video. Right. There's a quote later on that they discuss in the latter part of the video that says, how can one be a coward if one chooses this way of life? And the way of life that we know they're talking about is the way. The way, their conscious, their moral, and their ethical compass. This thing that drives the bounty hunters in what should be a righteous path of sorts, right? Specifically, that being the turmoil of this main Mandalorian. But the piece that connects and resonates with me in a direct connection to youth and their ability to implement life skills and many of the other curricula is this idea that they have to develop their own internal code when associating themselves with healthy decision-making for substance abuse. And specifically, that code has to be something that they're so comfortable with that they don't see themselves as cowardice, but as leaders in their code. It becomes their intrinsic motivator. Youth have carrots that you can guide them along with, and an extrinsic type of motivation gets them. Gift cards are helpful. That's things we've had to do in COVID, give electronic gift cards and students emails and all types of incentive plans, and connect with them on Padlet and do social media competitions and health challenges and things of that nature. We've gotten all of that underway, but when it comes to social interactions, which is usually where substances are consumed, scholars will lead themselves in the way in which most of their peers are going, as to not seem to be cowardice. But they're not being driven by an intrinsic motivation that then prevents them from making poor decision making. At that point, they're extrinsically being led by social capital that does not benefit a positive decision-making opportunity for them. So they have to develop an intrinsic code that tells themselves, no matter what, this is the way. Healthier decision-making, healthier management of stress, healthier resiliency, healthier emotional regulation and competency. This is the way. And we'll talk more about what that looks like moving forward. Next slide. So once a scholar establishes a code, and they do this by all types of ways, and honestly, you can look at social media and a scholar's interaction with such to help determine a code. What are the things they care most about? What do they own in their own lives and in their own decision-making? I give an analogy often. Many of us rent vehicles for one reason or another. They go on vacation, or sometimes we just want to have a night out on the town and just do something a little flashier, and we rent vehicles. And usually if you rent a car, whether for leisure, for business, vacation, or an experience, typically we don't move and treat a rental car the same way we do our own personal vehicle. Maybe there's a pothole that normally we would have risked it all to avoid in our own car, but in a rental, you're like, I'm giving this thing back in 48 hours. Gadoosh, right? It's a little bit different. If it's a rental car, you probably don't eat in the car the same way you do your own, but it's a rental. I done paid for them to clean this thing. They'll take care of it in 48 hours. French fries everywhere. But when it's your own, you move differently because you understand you've put an investment into something that has to yield a return for you. You own this. It is yours. It's your baby. So your code is essentially a scholar's foundation and rock of ownership. And life skills really gets this across to scholars, and we'll talk about what those components are and what they look like in a digital space. Next slide. So there's multi-dimensional engagement for students, and we'll talk about what some of those things are, but specifically there's three that I want to give you guys that directly connects to life skills. The first being behavioral engagement, that which is focusing on participation in academic, social, and co-curricular activities. Next engagement, and emotional engagement. The next emotional engagement is the focus on the extent and nature of positive and negative reactions to teachers, classmates, academics, and school. Because again, we're talking about what this looks like in the framework of school. Next. The third and final being that of cognitive engagement, focusing on scholars' level of investment in learning. Again, investment in learning, ownership. Next slide. So there are three major parts of a lesson that I wanted to present to you guys, and I wanted to show you guys, because again, this is a three-series platform that we're giving you guys. So we're talking about what some of this looks like, we're talking about how it looks in a digital space, and then we're digging in deep as the series continues on. But resilience is one of the major key functions in life skills, and you'll see a lot of what this is in these components of their different lessons. So you'll see over here, there's an inventory and a cache of things that life skills presents to scholars for reflection. These sheets are all in a Google form for us in our school community. Everything that was once in a hard copy is now in an interactive digital space. If you are not familiar with your G Suites, become familiar with your G Suites, especially because they're expanding them. Just last week, Google Meets, as a platform competitive to Zoom, now incorporated extensions for attendance and for breakout rooms. So you need to make sure that you're very familiar with whatever you're using as a core foundation platform and keeping up with it, because it's moving quick and they're expanding a lot of these things. All that we have in terms of our lessons and hard copies are all on Google Forms. This particular piece talks about resilience, and a definition that connects resilience to our engagement that we spoke about earlier, specifically behaviorally, is that resilience is equal to a scholar's ability to actively participate. Participate, that's that verbiage that we were talking about in the behavioral space. Participate despite distraction, deterrence, or isolated failure. Next slide. Again, Google Form. If you see here, the deep breathing, the being on your own and best friend, we've been interacting with everybody inside of the chat. A lot of times we'll use Padlet. Padlet is a great anonymous platform, and Mandy is going to talk about it a lot more in her piece. And you guys, I think, are going to get to play with it a little bit. But Padlet is a great way for scholars to jump in to contribute things, either in an anonymous space or a namespace, but on a whole kind of a global screen for all of us to engage and really prompt discussion. Stress management is that other key piece. Stress management being that in a way in which directly connects to a scholar's ability to emotionally regulate and be emotionally aware. You can guess that this directly connects to that emotional engagement piece for scholars. Next slide. Bounce back. Another component that you'll see in a lot of the lessons that go with the life skills curricula. And in these bounce back techniques, they bridge it to the stress management from before. And again, they're giving you these different reference points to take away from, kind of like anchor charts in a classroom. So what are some of the things that you can do here with this? I have actually a rotating town hall presentation that we do daily on one form in a Zoom platform, and that we do network-wide weekly. A lot of times these bounce back techniques will become themed town halls where everyone in the school community is joined in to receive a single charge, and then they're separated out into breakout rooms on either Zoom or Google Meets with assigned educators to do expansive work and discussion in breakout rooms, either in Google Meets or Zoom. And again, by definition, a bounce back occurs when scholars can weigh their investments in healthy decision-making against an adverse or unhealthy choice. This is where the code gets activated. This is where a scholar can go back to that reference and that contribution from another one of their peers on Padlet, the discussion that they were able to do live annotation onto their tablets with, if it's in a Google form. These are some of the interactive things that we're doing that bridge the content, the theory, and getting scholars to access it through digital mediums and platforms. Next slide. With that, again, we're jumping in, we're giving you guys a little bit of the taste. This is a series, and we're going to expand on how we're engaging youth and parents in this COVID time, but with kind of the quick level introduction and kind of the cachet and the throw of some of the strategies we're doing. I would love to field any questions that anyone may have about how to, again, cement and establish a code that is matched up with the different competencies that scholars are going to need to make positive decisions, even when no one is around.
Yes, yes. It's like substitute teachers, right?
Yep, exactly.
First question we have is, did you develop your own Google Forms for life skills training, or did they come from Botfin?
We developed our own.
So any other questions for you? There's a couple other questions that were asked earlier. Does life skills training have the interactive platform available, or would teachers have to create these?
We've done most of them internally. We have a lot of the hard copy stuff. So just as a sheer machine and way, we have a tech team that just is phenomenal with the functionality of it. So we've been converting them for ourselves. A lot of it also has to do with inside of our own G Suite. There's a lot of connections because of being an organization. Thank you. Being an organization, it's really important that you develop a lot of the content within your specific G Suite organization for permission purposes. So we've just been doing a lot of it ourselves.
Great. Have you used the Galexia game? That it's a new resource from Life Skills Training.
We have not specifically used that particular expansion, but guess what? By the time we talk again, we probably will.
And do you use life skills in middle school or high school?
Both. Use it in both middle school and high school. In the high school, we do couple it a little bit more with some of our other advisory curricula. So we integrate it in. In the high school level, we have a really expansive piece that ranges from all kinds of things. And we actually then fold in. Life Skills does have a high school specific program and a middle school specific program. They also have a transitions program for the post-secondary support for scholars. We actually integrate the high school pieces in with other just SEL curricula that we've established over the years as well.
Great. You mentioned social media competitions in the beginning. Can you explain more about what those might look like?
Oh man, Kahoot is something that gets all of the scholars getting riled up and crazy. Nearpod is really, really dope. We also use, we're partnered with a great organization and a positive social media platform called Bridget. And what Bridget does is Bridget has a number of internally built modules, but it also allows for student tracking and kind of ticking and news and, positive praise and affirmation amongst peers that are attached to points. So then the more positive affirmation and praise you give in the peer community, the more the points go up. We will have situations where over the weekend things will happen as scholars will shout each other out, either anonymously or in person, to give each other points. And then when you dig into some of them, you'll find out that they were really crucial instances, such as my peer got me to walk away from a situation that could have been dangerous than the otherwise. And a lot of times, what we have to realize about social media and youth is that social media is probably the one place where there's a greater equity of voice amongst the youth demographic than there is in real life, because even though you may not have a voice face-to-face, a lot of time they'll provide a voice and increased engagement through a social media platform. Bridget does that really well and is nice, neat, and contained, and they specialize with partnerships with schools. So all those other protective barriers that you would need are in there.
Great, great. And we will be providing links to the developers, and I do want to just share that Life Skills Training yesterday just announced that they're doing some webinars that will also provide their own adaptations. And each of these curriculum have different philosophies in terms of how proprietary they are and how open they are. Our next, Botfin Life Skills is very controlling of how you use their materials. But again, we need to, follow rules and laws and make things work for our students at this point. So I hope those of you who do that will take advantage, and we'll put those in the email for tomorrow. Thank you so much, Cedric. And our next curriculum is Mandy Paradise will be talking about project success. And I will put in the link in the chat. They have a Dropbox open to anyone. You just need to ask permission. So they have your information to give it. And I'll put that link in the chat. Mandy, please.
Thank you, Shelley. It's an honor to follow both Michelle and Cedric, and our third presentation being Project Success, and focusing on mainly the Prevention Ed series. But just a reminder, my background is in curriculum and instruction, which is really being put to great use recently with the move towards so much distance learning. So today I'll show you what's working for us in our program delivery. Slide, please. I'll be featuring Project Success and walking us through some of the adaptation tools for remote learning, and then facilitating us through just a portion of a lesson so you can kind of see in action. So we'll have a little bit of interaction together. Slide, please. First, let's talk about Project Success. Project is a fantastic program. It's built for the secondary setting, and it's one of the many reasons that people utilize it is due to its multi-tiered integrated design. So it's not a curriculum, and unlike a curriculum, Project Success is kind of a suite of services, including groups and one-on-ones. It offers universal prevention for all students and targeted intervention supports for students who need it. So it works well in both traditional and alternative schools. Project Success has several components, so it's a great way to serve the full student body and the varied levels of vulnerability among other identified students. Now, at the universal level, it has prevention clubs, awareness campaigns that are school-wide, they do outreach, and there's prevention education that is universal. And when it comes to targeted services, Project Success offers one-on-one supports and targeted groups. So Project Success was created by the Student Assistance Services Corporation and the amazing Ellen Morehouse. And if you'd like more information, please visit their website. It's here on this slide, and it's also in some of the upcoming slides. Rachel, slide please. So my focus is mostly on the prevention education series part of Project Success model today, only because there's just so many components of Project Success. But the prevention education series is a classroom-based instructional set of lessons, and it serves two functions. One, it's meant to raise awareness and prevent substance use through critical content, such as relationships, being an adolescent, and substance use prevention intervention. So a lot of the same kind of content that we heard from Michelle and Cedric. The second function of prevention education series in Project Success is to introduce students to the Project Success counselor in their school. This person may have various names like the Project Success counselor, the prevention interventionist, or the student assistance professional. So this component of the program is part of basic prevention education and part fireside chat to get to know that staff person, like the warm referral, right? Prevention education series occurs in all classes in a grade band. And this is to ensure that the whole student body gets some face time with the staff person and that all students receive important prevention content that is supplemental to the health courses that they may take this year or in the following year. It also helps, excuse me, it also helps the Project Success counselor or intervention specialist to identify and connect with students that would benefit from targeted intervention supports like groups or referrals. So it's an opportunity to assess and scan. Now, the great thing about Project Success, including the prevention education series, is that most all the activities and components can be done in a virtual or distance learning setting. Slide, please, Rachel, thank you. A few ways that we can implement Project Success with meaningful distance learning strategies. One is that we've been doing all day, which is using the chat box. So when in person, we might have done something like a pair share or a small group discussion. The fact that the chat feature is available in many platforms, whether you're using Google or Zoom, and it can be used to engage students through live and synchronous exchange. It's also great for students who might be a little bit more introverted and less likely to share out loud in group settings. So since we've already done it a few times today, I just want to give you a warning. We'll probably do it a few more times. Another way to maximize engagement, slide please, Rachel, or at least click. The other way to maximize engagement and adapt programming for remote learning is thinking about scheduling. I saw this question come up in the Q&A. In traditional implementation, education and groups can occur during school hours, and that's usually where they only occur, specifically during classroom instructional time. Now, an adaptation to consider is to not limit implementation of these components to only being during in-school hours or instructional times. So we want to look for hours that's, we want to try to avoid those limited hours that students are engaged in instruction. Now, depending on your school, students doing remote learning may only have 3 hours of synchronous instructional time. Because of this, teachers are less likely to share those limited instructional hours with people doing student support programs. And we, just because the school day has been reduced, it doesn't mean that we can't find the time. So there's a lot of opportunity to hold program during other times that are more accessible for students who cannot miss the instructional hours. This adaptation also reduces duplication of classes, right? So instead of having to go to Mr. Smith's first period and then Miss June's second period, a Project Success counselor or student assistance professional can set morning and afternoon sessions that are open to the entire student body. And this eliminates the need to do back-to-back periods of classroom presentations and instead host AM and PM. And those AM and PMs can be repeated over the week. This helps us reach larger cohorts of students. And it also provides students some more flexibility. If they've missed a lesson in the past, they probably have a catch-up option now later in the week, or that didn't exist before. Slide, please. Another way to maximize engagement and adapt programming for remote learning is to use the virtual tools and platforms, things that recreate the engagement strategies that took place in person. So Google's G Suite was discussed by Cedric. I call it Google. And the Google tools exist. Things like Google Drive and Google Folders are great because you can share them to multiple people. And having like a Google Drive enables students to tangibly see, observe, interact, and make digital contributions, much like they would have in a class setting, sitting in a group and doing all an activity in a shared setting. People also asked earlier about pre-post tests and can these be implemented? How are we doing that? We do use Google Forms as a way to do pre or post tests in some cases. Now, it depends on the type of data collection you're doing, right? Some data cannot be collected through these means because of confidentiality purposes. So we use Google Forms in our program. We also do a secure survey done through a contractor. We also sometimes administer pre-post by phone. It really depends on the content of what's being collected in that survey. Trello and Padlet, they function like a bulletin board with some really neat detailed options. Any of these can be used to co-create documents, share links, share videos, share tasks. Another share site where people get together can facilitate group work. One example might be doing like a school-wide awareness campaign for one of your prevention clubs. These tools enable students to cooperatively and concurrently work on items, and it lets everybody access them. So I think I'll tie this up by saying that items, these kind of tools can facilitate similar opportunities that small group discussion, presentations, posters or butcher paper or sticky notes enabled, right? Many curricula have suggested activities and Project Success is included in that. And they have activities that can be adapted for online instruction if you know which tools to use when. Slide, please. Oh, I see real quick in the chat. Are Trello and Padlet free? Yes, to some degree, but there are free versions and then paid versions. So it's how much capacity you get in either of them. Back to Project Success. Not only is Project Success easily adaptable to remote learning, but the developer has created a Dropbox where facilitators and trainers can access a variety of pre-adapted activities and program components. So one of the questions earlier in the Q&A was, have you worked with the developers on these adaptations? And we can say 1000% yes. We worked really closely with the developers to just document and get approved our adaptations. And then those adaptations, because the developer believes so strongly in their work, have been cataloged in this wonderful Dropbox. So there's a whole bunch of different adaptations that achieve the same outcomes that the program is seeking to do through digital means. Slide, please, Rachel. One example is the Project Success group activities. So this is the tier 2 services, not the universal. It has multiple variations in this manual now for both face-to-face and virtual. So if we had more time today, I'd run through some of these group activities in addition to prevention education series. But you'll get the idea when through the demos you've seen with Cedric and Michelle and the demo I'm doing, that there are some pretty universal ways to go about it. Now, if you're thinking of using Project Success or are currently using it, make sure to connect with the Student Assistance Services Corporation for training and access to those Dropbox materials. Slide, thank you. Next up, I'm going to walk through a portion of the prevention education lesson within the Project Success. To frame the activity, I want us to really grasp the purpose of prevention education series. So in the manual, it states that the prevention education series is designed as an outreach strategy. It provides students with more exposure to you, the facilitator, and help students better understand the kinds of concerns that a student assistance professional or Project Success counselor can be helpful with, right? It's designed to encourage ATOD users and those who have substance abusing parents to join a group. It helps you, the facilitator, identify students who display attitudes, behaviors, or feelings that warrant follow-up. So with that, right, that's the framing. Slide, please. I'm now going to invite you to join me in an activity. So the way and click, please. The way we can join along, we'll be using the chat box and by responding to the prompts. So I'm just going to put on my facilitator hat real quick, and we'll just do 2 quick activities. Here we go. Slide, please, Rachel. So it's really great to have you all in class today to do our lesson on substance use prevention. Now, when it comes to being a teen, you have a lot of power and you have a lot of choice. So remember, we talked about how our brain is working really hard right now. And the best thing we can do to help our brain is to avoid using substances like marijuana, alcohol, opioids, and other drugs. Now, it's your call. You can choose not to use. And if you're wanting help with this, just know that I'm here anytime to talk and help support you with that. Rachel, slide, please. And while we're talking about this content today, about substance use, let's do an activity in the chat box. So Rachel, will you click the slide? Let us think about the reasons people don't use drugs or alcohol. Think about why a person might quit if they were using. Now, I would love to see your responses in the chat box. Why do you think people stop using or choose not to use drugs? I see sports, they want to stay in control, their parents, they have better things to do, family and health reasons, keeping their grades up, their friends, avoiding trouble. They know consequences. They have other goals because they want to honor their religion, good grades. It's against their morals, shame and guilt. Wow, you guys are really good at this. I can tell that you have a lot of valuable things that you thought about related to this. Self-respect. Yeah, really great job, everyone. Perfect. Slide, please. We're going to move it forward. So nice work. It seems that you really covered all the key reasons people would stop using substances or choose not to use substances. But we're going to read through all the really common ones quickly. So there's the reasons people would avoid include health, goals, and safety. They want to avoid addiction. They feel better when they don't use substances because substance use can be expensive. And one more click. They avoid using substances or they stop because they want to relieve stress, because they have goals around career and college, and a big reason is sports, because of the sports code of conduct. Nice work again. So next, one more activity. Oh, can we go back one? Thanks. We're going to think about our reasons, about what matters to us, what matters to you. I want to just draw your attention real quick to the chat box because I'm going to drop a link in it. Let's see here. There we are. There's a link. Will you please click that link and have it open up? I want you to go ahead and open and use it. I want you to post your reasons why in this Padlet that you are or you'd be drug-free. You can write an answer. You can post a GIF. You can use a picture of something that represents your reason. So maybe you have a dream job. Show us what it is. Maybe you're planning to go to college. Post your college mascot or logo. You can do one or two. Not seeing the link. Let's try again.
And you need to do it to everybody, not just the panelists.
Oh, thank you. There's the problem, technical difficulty. There's the link. So you guys have heard about what to expect. Last thing on using the Padlet, you don't have to do all the columns. You can just do one if you want, but they kind of cover the topic areas of goals, sports, jobs, and college. So what are your reasons why? All right, I'm seeing the Padlet get populated right now. When it comes to sports, people are focused on volleyball or softball. There's scholarships at stake. When it has to do with goals, people are saying staying healthy, be active, dream jobs, school counselor. Yes, we want you as a school counselor. We need you as a school counselor. So please, let's talk more. I want to help you get to that goal. What else do we see here? Getting into college, Montclair State University. Somebody's already representing their goals here. Fantastic work, you guys. Dance. Yeah, nice work. I'm so impressed by where you're at. And I can't wait for our next group session because we're going to build on this and we're going to talk more about our group goals, our individual goals, and the things that lay in our future. So if you like this Prevention Ed series, I want you to know I do groups and I want you in group if you're interested. So we can always talk more about that. All right, Rachel, will you put us back on the slide deck, please? So, and slide advance. I'm so glad you were all here today. Not everyone uses substances like marijuana, alcohol, opioids, or vaping products. In fact, most teens don't use substances of any kind. You can go ahead and click. This is true across the United States, and it's true in our community. The truth is most teens don't use substances. But if you or someone you know is struggling, help exists, right? So recovery is possible and things can get better. And I'm happy to talk more about this with anyone who's interested, because that's my job here at our school. If you have questions about substance use, let's talk. I'm here to help because I know how tough this can be. And again, we can do that one-on-one, and we can also talk about what kind of groups we offer. So I'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock for our next session. Bye. So that's me taking my facilitator hat off, right? And Rachel, will you get us to our next slide, please? So again, thank you for playing. The key purpose of the Prevention Education Series lessons within Project Success, especially the activities I just did, are about social norming and connecting with a Project Success counselor, which is the caring adult. Now, we heard Cedric focus on this too, that the concept of relationships is key because youth value relational exchange. You'll notice that Prevention Education Series emphasizes connection to the facilitator. It also uses virtual setting adaptations to maximize that engagement. So we use the chat box for kind of popcorn responses, and then we use the Padlet for creative expression around goals, and also documentation, right? So when you have a small enough group, you can kind of track on those things over time and build upon them. And these tools are multi-purpose in that they elicit responses from students. They help students associate this content with the Project Success facilitator, right? The counselor, the student assistance professional, and it models high warmth to build trust and connection with the Project Success counselor. So although quick and simplistic, I'm really hoping that this short demo gave you a sense of how Project Success or any of the other programs we're all using, right? This can be done and true in life skills. It can be done in Too Good for Drugs, many other programs that exist. We can adapt them for virtual settings, and that leveraging high warmth and reinforcement can be done. So questions, that's where we're at. Question slide.
Lots of fabulous comments, Mandy. I don't see any specific questions except for how did you get that animated person in the slide?
Yeah, right. YouTube is your friend. YouTube is your friend.
Yeah.
Go teach yourself. And actually that came up earlier. People were asking about, how do you use YouTube channels? What about Snapchat? And it's critical. I think we're a mixed group in that some of us are educators and school-based, and some of us are not. And I think that what people outside schools don't realize is that you have to fit into your school culture. If my school says you can only use Google Classroom, then we don't use Zoom because it's not part of the policy and procedure. If our school says we don't use social media, then neither do we, because we adhere and acculturate to what our school needs and wants. So, sometimes the little details get left out about how critical the role of school providers and schools, local education agencies, state education agencies can be in this work. So I do want to emphasize that. But when it comes to something like YouTube or Snapchat, when we have the right permissions, our student assistance professionals who are our Project Success counselors, they, some of them have permission to use YouTube. And what we do is we create monthly health check-ins, right? Like, or declarations or commitments to substance-free life. So we use YouTube channels as a way of connecting. We do Bitmoji and virtual offices, and we have files and things. So we have a lot of resources, not enough to be able to explain all today. But in terms of adaptation, you find it's like a web. You start and you build a node, and then you build another node, and you just keep centering it back to the outcomes and the fidelity component of your curricula or program in our case.
Man, awesome way to bring this to a close. There's a couple of last things to share. Next slide, Rachel. Really fabulous, Mandy, Michelle, and Cedric. I mean, what a blessing. So we do have a Middle Schools and COVID-19 Guidance for Addressing Resilience and Substance Use, a 4-page brief that's available right now at the Opioid, I feel like an advertiser, the opioidresponsenetwork.org. And it includes a parent checklist. We'll be talking a lot more about some of these broader ideas, how to engage with parents and students outside of curriculum at our next session. Go to the next slides, please. We are hosting 2 more of these sessions. Our next session, November 19th, a week from today, same time, same place, Zoom, and December 10th after Thanksgiving, and then a week later, again, Thursdays. We hope you'll join us at our 3rd session, which will be on parent prevention education. We'll have a master parent educator, you know what I mean by master, which is Alicia Wolf joining us. And we thank you all. Again, last slide, please, if you have questions or needs from the Opioid Response Network, you can go to the website, email, or call. And mostly, bring your hearts, yourself, right? Letting students know you care, keeping your eye on that North Star and those objectives. And we know that you will be creative and find ways to take care of yourself and engage your students. Thank you so much, really. Thank you, Rachel Brooke and Michelle Baker.